friends, and welcome to the 8th episode of our series on selfishness in marriage. This is the last episode that we're going to do. We have been doing this series for a while, and now we've come to the conclusion of the series with this episode of selfishness in our marriages. This episode talks about selfishness, or the selfish lover. The selfish lover. We are actually talking about sex in this one. So let me start with a disclaimer. Yokefellow Ministries is a Christian, Bible-based ministry, and so the only sex we can talk about is sex between a husband and his one wife. It is the sex in the marriage relationship. Anything outside that is sexual immorality. It is fornication or adultery. So the one we are talking about is sex within the marriage context. The selfish lover. Who is the selfish lover? Who are we talking about? We are talking about the spouse who makes love for themselves only. You know, God created both animals and mankind with a system of procreation that brings the male and the female together to reproduce. Now for animals, it's called mating, and it is for the sole purpose of reproduction. In animals, it's instinctive. The only thing the animal has mates for is for procreation. And so when the female is on heat, the male instinctively gets the scent of this heat and looks for the female, and they go specifically for procreation, for conception. That's why they mate, just for conception and for reproduction. In human beings, it's a bit different. In human beings, we don't mate, we have sex. But I prefer to use the term we make love, because in marriages we have sex as an expression of love. So I prefer to use the term we make love. And in human beings, it's not only for reproduction, but it is also for the pleasure of both parties, both the husband and the wife. Unfortunately, many have turned sex into something for their own pleasure and not for the pleasure of the spouse. Now when that happens, it is now becomes an expression of love, but an expression of love for self. You're expressing love for just yourself. Now when this happens, we can pick out three effects. There are three effects in the marriage when this happens. One of the spouses is sexually unfulfilled. You don't get sexual fulfillment because your partner is just looking to fulfill themselves. The second is the affected spouse feels used. You feel like a tool. You feel like just a sexual tool, something that your spouse is just using to pleasure themselves. So you feel like a sexual tool. But the worst case scenario, and we just pray against this kind of a scenario, the worst case scenario is when the spouse begins to feel the need to look for this sex or sexual satisfaction elsewhere. Now that is a dangerous scenario, and that is the worst case scenario. But we want to now just look at how can we cure this. Because we remember we've been talking about each aspect of selfishness as a symptom of that selfishness. So what is the cure for this particular symptom of selfishness? So let's look at what the scripture has to say. 1 Corinthians 7 verses 3 and 4, and this I am reading from the New Living Translation. And it says this: the husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. That's the first part. Now let's just talk about that a little bit. It is the responsibility of the husband to fulfill the sexual needs of his wife. So with every sexual act, the husband needs to be looking at, how do I fulfill the needs of my wife? And the wife needs to be looking at, how do I fulfill the sexual need of my husband? Because that's what the scripture says. It is the husband's responsibility to fulfill the sexual need of his wife. And then it is his wife's responsibility to fulfill his sexual need. So when you go into making love, you need to go in saying, I am here to fulfill my spouse's sexual need. And then the scripture goes on to say, the wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. So you have taken your body and you have told your spouse, it is yours, I have given it to you. So you then need to be making sure that, because I have given my husband my body, or because I have given my wife my body, I need to be sure that she is getting from it what she needs to be getting. Her sexual need is being fulfilled. So it is my job to ensure that her sexual need is being fulfilled. And it is her job to ensure that my sexual need is being fulfilled. So the responsibility is the other way around. You don't go into bed to fulfill your own need. You go into bed to fulfill your spouse's need. That's the starting point. So let's just look at how we can do that, how we can make that possible. Now, how we make this possible is actually talking about the sexual experience. We have to learn to talk about the sexual experience. Sex in marriage is not a taboo. It's not a taboo. Many of us go into marriage thinking, oh, this is a taboo, we can't talk about it. But sex in marriage is ordained by God, and it is good. So we can talk about it, and we must learn to talk about it all the time. Every sexual experience, talk about it. Find out from each other what works and what doesn't work. Ladies are seasonal people. The cycle it puts them through many different seasons, and sometimes what works today might not necessarily work tomorrow. So find out from your partner, find out from your spouse what works for you in this sexual experience. For a long time now, my wife and I, when we get involved, we rate ourselves. And you'd be surprised to find that at the end of a sexual experience, as we are rating ourselves, I can decide one experience was an 8. We rate ourselves from 1 to 10. I thought the sexual experience was an 8. It was amazing. On the other hand, my wife thought it was a 4. It wasn't so amazing to her. So then we want to find out, why was this? Why did I come up with something that I thought was so amazing and yet she didn't? We talk about it. That's what you need to be doing with every sexual experience. You need to be talking about it. For many, in the beginning, it might be a bit awkward. You might think it's awkward talking about your sexual experience. But as you go along, it becomes easier. Talk about every sexual experience. What did we do well, and what didn't we do well? How was the experience? And then as you talk about it, also try new things, experiment, and you will progress like that, progressing slowly. It's not an event. It is a process. You will progress, and eventually you'll get to the point where both of you are enjoying the experience, and you're relaxed about it, and you are talking about it. But one thing you must make sure you're not doing is making it a pressure thing. On the scale of 1 to 10, one of you keeps getting 3, and they begin to think, look, what is it you're not doing right? And you begin to put your spouse under pressure. It must never be a pressure thing. In fact, it must be a fun thing. When you're talking about it, you are talking and you are experiencing and you are having fun as you develop your sexual experience. Every sexual experience you can talk about and you can build on it and you can make it better for yourselves. And it must not be something that you are putting each other under a lot of pressure about. It's just something you are talking about and developing to make it a better experience. You are a husband and wife, and every sexual experience can be an amazing experience if we allow it to be that. If we are able to be free with one another and talk to one another about it and develop that sexual experience. I pray that God will help us to grow in our sexual experience in the marriage. God bless you. Hello friends. It is my prayer that you have learned something helpful to your marriage from this video. We also have other videos in this same series that talk about different aspects of selfishness in marriage. We started off with the question, how do I know if I'm being selfish? And we tackled also the first symptom, our relationship with God. If our relationship with God is all about us, that's the first symptom that you're being selfish. And we related that to our marriages. Then we talked about conditional love being a symptom of selfishness. Then we talked about one-sided expectations being a symptom of selfishness. We also looked at you being too competitive, not competitive because that's not bad, but too competitive, being a symptom of selfishness. We talked about not listening to your spouse. We talked about never being wrong. And finally, we have talked about the selfish lover. These are the episodes that we have done in this series on selfishness in marriage. If you've missed any one of them, go back, look at them. You might be able to learn something that will be helpful in your marriage. And also don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so that you can be getting the videos as we churn them out. Don't forget also to like and to tell a friend. Also, give us your feedback, give us your comments. We'd like to know what you think and what we can do to make this channel better for you and for I. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you.